My neighbor showed up with a bulldozer and claimed half of my backyard belonged to him. He had workers. He had survey papers. He even threatened to tear down my property before sunset. He thought I would panic. What he never knew, my late father left me every original legal document proving the land was mine. And by the end of that day, the man who tried to steal my property uncovered a secret buried for more than 80 years. I woke before sunrise to the grinding sound of heavy machinery. The noise shook my bedroom windows. A deep metallic scrape echoed across my backyard. At first, I thought the city had started emergency roadwork. Then I looked outside. A bright yellow bulldozer was parked beside my property line. Fresh wooden stakes had been hammered into my grass. Orange construction tape stretched across my vegetable garden. A crew of workers stood beside a man I recognized immediately. My neighbor, Richard Collins. He smiled as if he already owned everything he could see. His expensive boots crushed my flower beds. He pointed toward my backyard with complete confidence. The workers nodded without asking a single question. Cold air rushed through the open window. My stomach tightened. Every instinct warned me that something was terribly wrong. I threw on my jacket. I ran outside barefoot. Morning dew soaked my feet. The wet grass clung to my skin. Richard barely looked at me. "Good morning," he said with a grin. "You are standing on my property." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He laughed softly. "The survey is finished. The boundary changed. Half of this yard belongs to me." The words hit me harder than the cold wind. My father had bought this land almost 40 years earlier. Every birthday, every family barbecue, every memory I treasured had happened inside these fences. Richard casually unfolded a glossy survey map. He waved it in front of my face. The paper looked official. Bright red lines sliced directly through my backyard. According to his map, my storage shed, my garden, my old oak tree, even part of my patio, all belonged to him. "You have 1 hour," Richard said calmly. "After that, demolition begins." The bulldozer engine roared louder. The vibration traveled through the ground. Birds exploded from the oak tree. Workers unloaded concrete blocks. One man measured the ground with laser equipment. Another sprayed fluorescent paint across my lawn. I felt trapped inside a nightmare. My hands trembled. My heartbeat pounded inside my ears. I forced myself to breathe. "Show me the official county approval," I demanded. Richard folded his arms. "You are wasting your time. The paperwork has already been filed." He sounded so certain, almost rehearsed. His confidence unsettled me more than his threats. I glanced toward my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Lawson. She watched from her porch. Her expression was filled with worry. She slowly shook her head. Something about her reaction caught my attention. She knew something. Richard stepped closer. "If you interfere with construction, I will call the police." His voice echoed across the quiet neighborhood. Several neighbors stepped outside. Curtains moved. Garage doors opened. People watched silently. Nobody wanted to become involved. I looked back at the bright orange survey stakes. One stood directly on top of the bronze property marker my father had shown me years ago. That marker had never moved. Not once. Not ever. I knelt beside the stake. My fingers brushed away damp soil. The old metal survey pin appeared beneath the dirt. Richard noticed immediately. His smile disappeared for the first time. He quickly stepped between me and the workers. "There is no need to examine that," he said. His sudden nervousness spoke louder than any words. I brushed away more dirt. The original survey cap became fully visible. It carried the county seal. It also carried a date, 1987. Exactly the year my parents purchased the land. Richard looked away. One worker frowned. Another stopped measuring. The bulldozer driver shut off the engine. Silence settled across the yard. The absence of noise felt heavier than the machine itself. I stood up slowly. "So why does your new survey ignore the original county marker?" Richard forced another smile. Old markers become inaccurate. His answer came too quickly. The construction foreman scratched his beard. I have never heard that before. Richard shot him an angry look. I hired professionals. The paperwork is legitimate. The foreman extended his hand. May I see the complete survey package? Richard hesitated, only for a second, but everyone noticed. He slowly handed over a thick folder. The foreman flipped through the pages. His expression changed. One eyebrow lifted. He flipped back, then forward again. His eyes narrowed. Where is the county certification page? Richard cleared his throat. It is attached. The foreman continued searching. It is not here. Richard reached for the folder. You skipped it. The foreman pulled the papers away. No, I checked twice. A nervous murmur spread among the workers. One laborer quietly whispered to another. Mrs. Lawson stepped off her porch. She walked across the street, carrying something inside a weathered envelope. I believe this belongs here, she said. She handed me the envelope. Inside rested several old photographs. One picture showed my father standing beside the exact bronze property marker during installation. Another showed county surveyors measuring the land decades earlier. Every photograph carried handwritten dates. Every picture clearly displayed the boundary. Richard stared at the photographs. Color drained from his face. Mrs. Lawson folded her arms. I kept copies because your father helped my husband during our property survey. He always believed records should never disappear. Richard looked furious. You are interfering with private business. Mrs. Lawson smiled gently. No, I am protecting the truth. The foreman studied the photographs. He compared them with Richard's survey. His face became increasingly serious. These measurements do not match. Richard suddenly became defensive. That old information means nothing. I looked directly into his eyes. It means everything. I walked inside my house. Richard laughed behind me. You are giving up already? I ignored him. The hallway felt strangely calm. Sunlight streamed through family photographs hanging on the walls. Every picture reminded me of one simple lesson my father repeated throughout my childhood. Never throw away important papers. Never trust memory when documents exist. I entered the study. An old fireproof cabinet stood beside the desk. The steel door still carried scratches from the house fire 15 years earlier. Inside rested dozens of carefully labeled folders. Each one contained decades of records, tax receipts, property maps, insurance documents, building permits, county correspondence. Original purchase agreements, everything. My father had organized every document with almost obsessive precision. Many people teased him for it. Now his habits suddenly felt priceless. I removed one thick binder. Across the front, written in black marker, were 4 simple words. Part E records, original copies. Dust floated through the morning light. My hands no longer shook. Instead, I felt something else. Confidence. Because Richard believed he had cornered an unprepared homeowner. What he forgot, what he never imagined, was that I possessed every original legal document connected to that land since the very first purchase. And hidden inside that binder was one document that was about to destroy everything he believed he had planned. The binder felt heavier than I remembered. Its worn leather cover carried scratches from decades of use. I carried it outside with steady hands. Richard stood beside the bulldozer. His confidence returned the moment he saw me. You finally came to accept reality, he said. I placed the binder on the hood of his truck. No, I came to show everyone the truth. The construction crew gathered around. Several neighbors walked closer. Mrs. Lawson remained quietly beside me. I opened the binder. Plastic sleeves protected every document inside. Nothing had faded. Nothing had been lost. The first page was the original deed. The county seal was embossed into the paper. The signatures were still perfectly visible. I turned another page. The official survey completed before my parents purchased the property. Every measurement matched the bronze survey marker buried beneath the grass. Another page revealed the approved boundary plat, every corner, every angle, every recorded distance. Exactly the same. Richard folded his arms. Old paperwork proves nothing. I smiled. I expected you to say that. I reached deeper into the binder. My fingers stopped on a thick envelope marked in my father's handwriting. Future legal protection. I slowly opened it. Inside rested certified copies, not photocopies, not scans, certified originals. Each carried raised county seals. The construction foreman accepted them carefully. He compared them with Richard's survey. His expression hardened. He looked at Richard. Your documents conflict with county records. Richard shrugged. The county updated everything. I pulled out another document. No, they never did. It was a letter from the county recorder. The letter confirmed that no boundary adjustment had ever been approved. No subdivision had ever been requested. No easement had ever been granted. No property exchange had ever occurred. Everything remained exactly as recorded 40 years earlier. The foreman looked directly at Richard. Do you have proof of this supposed update? Richard reached into his briefcase. He searched quickly, then faster. Paper after paper appeared. Receipts, maps, invoices, nothing official. Sweat formed across his forehead. His confidence slowly disappeared. One worker whispered, "This does not look good." Richard finally produced a folded paper. This is the updated survey. The foreman unfolded it. He studied every inch. His eyes stopped near the bottom. His face changed instantly. This survey has no county filing number. Richard froze. The foreman continued reading. There is no licensed surveyor stamp. Another worker leaned over his shoulder. He is right. This signature is missing. The silence became painfully uncomfortable. Richard snatched the paper back. It is still valid. No, the foreman replied. It is not. I removed another document from the binder. This is the surveyor who completed the original work. The page contained his license number, his certification, his official field notes. Every handwritten measurement remained preserved. Mrs. Lawson smiled softly. Your father never trusted loose ends. I nodded. He believed paperwork speaks louder than arguments. Richard suddenly pointed toward the bronze property marker. Someone could have moved that. I reached into the binder again. I expected that accusation too. This time, I unfolded several large photographs. Each one showed the survey crew installing the marker decades earlier. Every photograph displayed nearby landmarks. The oak tree, the stone retaining wall, the old drainage ditch, all still existed. Every image carried certified development records from the county planning office. The foreman compared the photographs with the actual yard. Everything matched perfectly. Richard looked trapped. His eyes darted from face to face. Nobody believed him anymore. A white pickup truck slowly turned onto our street. The county logo covered both doors. Everyone looked toward it. Two county officials stepped out. One carried a tablet. The other carried surveying equipment. Richard looked relieved. You see, they are here to settle this. The older official approached us. Who requested emergency boundary verification? I did, I answered. I called as soon as construction began. Richard stared at me. You called them? I certainly did. The official accepted my binder. He carefully examined every certified document. His younger partner located the bronze survey marker. Within minutes, professional equipment surrounded the yard yard. Laser instruments reflected tiny green beams across the property. Measurements began. Nobody spoke. Only the occasional electronic beep interrupted the silence. Richard paced back and forth. He checked his phone repeatedly. He avoided looking at anyone. Nearly 30 minutes passed. The younger official finally stood. We are finished. Every eye focused on him. He looked directly at Richard. The original boundary remains legally correct. He pointed toward my fence. This entire section belongs to the homeowner. He pointed toward Richard's survey stakes. Every one of these markers has been placed several feet inside private property. A shocked murmur spread through the crowd. Richard immediately protested. That equipment must be wrong. The older official shook his head. Our equipment is calibrated this morning. Our measurements match every historical county record. Richard's breathing became noticeably heavier. The official extended his hand. May I examine your survey? Richard reluctantly handed it over. The official looked at the document for less than 20 seconds. Then he sighed. I recognize this template. Richard stiffened. What does that mean? The official held up the survey. This format belongs to a surveying company whose license was permanently revoked 6 years ago. Complete silence filled the street. Even the birds seemed quiet. Richard blinked several times. That is impossible. The official turned the paper over. The business no longer exists. The license number printed here was cancelled. The individual listed as surveyor passed away 4 years ago. Every worker slowly stepped away from Richard. The construction foreman removed his hard hat. I am shutting this project down. Richard grabbed his arm. You cannot leave. Yes, I absolutely can. The foreman motioned toward his crew. Pack everything. We are finished. Machines began shutting down. The bulldozer engine died. Concrete blocks were loaded back onto trucks. Orange tape disappeared. The workers refused to look at Richard. Within minutes, the construction site vanished. Only tire tracks remained. Richard stood alone. His expensive suit no longer looked impressive. His shoulders slumped. The county official folded the fraudulent survey. Sir, I need you to explain where this document came from. Richard remained silent. Did you create this? Silence. Did someone create it for you? More silence. The official looked at him carefully. You understand that presenting fraudulent land records is a criminal offense. Richard swallowed hard. I paid someone. Who? I do not remember. The official raised an eyebrow. You spent thousands of dollars and you do not remember? Richard looked away. The answer convinced nobody. The younger official photographed every fake survey stake, every painted boundary line, every damaged section of my garden, every construction vehicle, every tire mark. Everything became evidence. Mrs. Lawson quietly squeezed my shoulder. Your father would be proud. I looked across my yard. The old oak tree stood exactly where it always had. Its branches swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. For the first time all day, I felt able to breathe. Then the older county official asked one final question. Has anything else unusual happened since your neighbor moved here? The question caught my attention immediately. I thought carefully. Then memories began returning. Missing boundary flags, late-night digging noises, small piles of disturbed dirt, several security camera outages, even strangers walking near the property line after midnight. I slowly nodded. Actually, yes. A great many strange things. The official exchanged a serious glance with his partner. He reached into his truck. Then he removed a thick folder. Across the front was my property address. It was already filled with reports, complaints, inspection notes, anonymous tips, and photographs that I had never seen before. The official looked directly into my eyes. You are not the first homeowner who has reported suspicious activity involving your neighbor. Richard's face turned completely pale, because whatever was inside that county file was far bigger than one stolen backyard, and it was about to expose a scheme that had been unfolding across the neighborhood for years. The county official opened the thick folder with deliberate care. The papers inside had yellow tabs marking different addresses. I recognized several street names. Every one belonged to our neighborhood. The official spread the reports across the hood of his truck. Each file contained photographs, survey maps, inspection notes, signed complaints, one address after another, one homeowner after another. My pulse quickened. This has happened before? I asked. The official nodded. Several times, Mrs. Lawson slowly covered her mouth. I knew something felt wrong. The younger official unfolded a neighborhood map. Small red circles marked multiple properties. Every circle surrounded Richard's house. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Richard stared at the map. His face had become completely expressionless. The older official pointed toward the first report. 3 years ago, a retired couple reported missing survey markers. He opened another file. 2 years ago, a family discovered new property stakes after returning from vacation. Another file. 18 months ago, a homeowner received anonymous letters claiming his fence crossed the boundary. Another. A vacant lot suddenly received a fraudulent purchase offer. Every incident shared one detail. Richard lived next door. I looked at him. You planned this more than once. Richard remained silent. The official continued. None of the previous victims had complete records. They settled. They moved their fences. They surrendered small portions of land. They believed the fake surveys. A chill traveled through my body. It had never been about my garden. It had never been about my oak tree. Richard had been stealing land one piece at a time. One frightened homeowner after another. Mrs. Lawson suddenly gasped. My husband always said our backyard looked smaller. Her eyes filled with disbelief. We thought we remembered incorrectly. The official nodded sadly. You probably did lose land. Richard finally spoke. You have no proof. The official calmly lifted another folder. We do. Inside rested aerial photographs taken over many years. Every image came from official county records. The first photograph showed the neighborhood shortly after construction. Every fence aligned perfectly. The second photograph came 5 years later. One fence had shifted. The third photograph, another fence moved, then another, then another. Almost every change benefited one property, Rygards. The younger official enlarged the images on his tablet. Transparent overlays revealed every adjustment. Tiny pieces of land had disappeared. 3 feet, 4 feet, sometimes only 18 inches. Never enough for most people to notice. Enough to increase 1 yard. Enough to increase one property value. Enough to reshape legal boundaries if nobody challenged them. The construction foreman shook his head. I have never seen anything like this. Richard looked around desperately. You cannot prove I moved those fences. The official smiled slightly. No. But someone made a mistake. Richard straightened. What mistake? The official reached into the folder once more. He removed several invoices. They paid using checks. Each invoice listed the same landscaping company, the same fencing contractor, the same excavation crew. Every payment originated from Richard. His confidence vanished instantly. One worker from the construction crew stepped forward. I recognize that fencing company. They worked at my cousin's house. The official nodded. They cooperated fully. They kept every work order. He unfolded another document. Each work order included detailed instructions. Move fence 4 feet east. Remove original survey marker. Install replacement stake. Grade new property line. Richard closed his eyes. The neighborhood became completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Even passing traffic seemed distant. The official looked directly at Richard. Would you like to explain these instructions? Richard answered with a whisper. My lawyer told me everything was legal. What lawyer? Silence. What company prepared the paperwork? Silence again. The official folded his arms. Then we will identify them ourselves. At that moment, another vehicle arrived. A police cruiser rolled slowly onto the street, then another. 2 officers stepped out. They spoke briefly with the county officials. The older official handed them the fake survey, the forged invoices. The photographs. The police officers carefully reviewed everything. One officer approached Richard. Sir, we need to ask you several questions. Richard attempted to smile. This is all one big misunderstanding. The officer remained calm. Perhaps. But we still need answers. Richard glanced toward his house. For the briefest moment, it was almost invisible. Most people would have missed it. I did not. His eyes focused on his front door, then on an upstairs window, then back toward the officers. The movement lasted less than a second. The older county official noticed it too. He quietly asked, "Is there additional paperwork inside your home?" Richard hesitated. No. The hesitation lasted too long. The official turned toward the police officers. "I recommend securing the property." One officer walked toward the house. Richard suddenly became anxious. "You cannot enter." "We are not entering. We are preventing evidence from disappearing." Richard took one quick step toward his driveway. The second officer immediately stopped him. "Please remain here." His breathing became louder. His forehead glistened with sweat. Then something unexpected happened. The front door of Richard's house slowly opened. A young woman stepped outside. She looked frightened. She carried a cardboard storage box. Everyone watched. Richard shouted, "Go back inside." She ignored him. Her hands trembled as she approached the officers. "I think you need these." She placed the box on the hood of the police cruiser. The lid came off. The entire neighborhood gasped. Inside rested dozens of property folders. Each folder carried an address. Every address belonged to nearby homes. Some folders contained photographs, others contained maps. Many held handwritten notes. Several included forged surveys waiting to be used. One folder already displayed my address in bold black letters. The officer slowly opened it. Inside were drone photographs of my backyard, measurements of my fence, pictures of my bronze survey marker. A handwritten schedule, wait until homeowner travels, foam marker, install temporary stakes, bring construction crew Monday morning. The date matched today. Cold anger settled inside me. Richard had planned every minute. The young woman wiped tears from her face. I worked as his assistant. I believed he was developing property. I discovered the truth last night. I copied everything. She pointed toward the box. There are digital drives, too. Emails, scans, bank records. Everything. Richard whispered only one word. No. The officer opened another folder, then another. Each contained plans targeting different homeowners, different streets, different families. Years of preparation, years of deception. Mrs. Lawson quietly leaned against my fence. I cannot believe we lived beside him. Neither could I. The officer looked at Richard one final time. You are under arrest on suspicion of fraud. He gently placed handcuffs around Richard's wrists. The metallic click echoed through the silent neighborhood. Richard looked directly at me for the first time since we met. His arrogance had completely disappeared. Only fear remained. The police escorted him toward the cruiser. As he reached the back door, he stopped walking. He slowly turned toward my house, then toward the old oak tree. His expression changed. Almost into a smile. A strange smile, one that made the hairs on my arms stand up. He spoke quietly. You protected this property. He nodded toward the oak tree. But you still have no idea what is buried underneath it. Every person standing there froze. The wind rustled through the branches above us. The old tree swayed gently. Its roots stretched deep beneath the ground my family had owned for decades. The officers looked at one another, then back at me, because Richard no longer cared about the stolen land. He cared about something hidden beneath it, something important enough to risk years of fraud. And suddenly, my father's insistence on never cutting down that ancient oak tree no longer felt like simple sentiment. It felt like he had been protecting a secret that was never meant to be forgotten. Every conversation stopped. Even the police officers looked toward the oak tree. Richard refused to say another word. One officer opened the rear door of the patrol car. Richard sat down without resisting. His strange smile remained. The door closed. The cruiser pulled away. I stood beneath the old oak tree. Its thick trunk was wider than I could wrap my arms around. Deep grooves covered the bark. My father had always called it the oldest resident of the neighborhood. He refused every offer to remove it. He refused every suggestion to trim it heavily. He refused to build anything near its roots. As a child, I thought he simply loved old trees. Now I wondered if there had been another reason. The older county official approached me. "Has anyone ever excavated beneath this tree?" "Never. My father prohibited it." "Did he explain why?" "He only said the roots protected something important." The words left my mouth before I even realized I remembered them. Mrs. Lawson looked surprised. "I remember him saying that once." He laughed afterward. I assumed he was joking. I no longer believed he had been joking. The officials secured the area with temporary tape, not because they believed Richard, because they wanted to document everything. One officer photographed the oak tree from every angle. Another measured the distance between the trunk and the property markers. The assistant who exposed Richard quietly approached me. "My name is Emily." I thanked her. She looked exhausted. "I overheard Richard making phone calls. He never talked about your backyard. He always talked about the oak tree." "What did he say?" Emily closed her eyes while remembering. "He kept saying, 'The cash has to be under the roots.' The old man buried it before anyone could find it." A cold breeze moved through the branches above us. The leaves rustled softly. I looked up. Sunlight filtered through thousands of green leaves. The tree appeared peaceful, almost protective. The county official frowned. "Cash, that is an unusual word." Emily nodded. "He never called it treasure. He never called it money. He always used the word cash." The official wrote that down. What else? He searched historical records. He ordered aerial photographs. He paid for ground scanning equipment. He spent years researching your family. Those words unsettled me more than anything else. Years Richard had not randomly targeted my property. He had specifically targeted my family. The afternoon slowly faded into evening. Police investigators continued documenting evidence. Neighbors returned home. Mrs. Lawson stayed with me. Neither of us wanted to leave the yard. As sunset painted the sky orange, another vehicle arrived. This one belonged to the county archives. A woman stepped out carrying several long storage tubes. She introduced herself as the county historian. The older official briefed her on everything. She listened carefully, then she looked toward the oak tree. "I recognize this address." My attention sharpened. "You do?" She nodded. "This property appears several times in historical preservation records." She carefully unrolled an old survey map across my patio table. The paper looked ancient. Its edges had turned brown with age. "This map predates the neighborhood." She pointed toward my backyard. Before roads existed, before houses existed, only one landmark appeared, a massive oak tree. The same tree. She smiled slightly. "It has stood here for well over 150 years. I stared at the map. The tree had survived generations. The historian opened another tube. This time she revealed military survey records. The date caught my eye, 1944, during the war. She pointed toward handwritten notes. This land briefly belonged to the federal government. For what purpose? Storage. Storage. The answer surprised everyone. What kind of storage? We are not certain. The records are incomplete. Another folder appeared. This one contained correspondence between local officials. Most pages were damaged. One sentence remained readable. "Maintain secure location until retrieval authorization arrives." The remaining text had faded beyond recognition. The historian sighed. The retrieval authorization was never found. The older county official looked toward the oak tree. So whatever was stored here may never have been recovered. The possibility settled heavily over the yard. Emily spoke quietly. Richard believed it was still here. The historian nodded. Apparently. Night arrived. The investigators finally left. One officer remained outside until morning. The county asked me not to disturb the area. I agreed. Inside the house, I could not sleep. Every floorboard creaked louder than usual. Every branch tapping the roof sounded deliberate. Around midnight, I carried my father's binder into the living room. If he protected something, the answer had to be inside these records. Hour after hour, I searched. Tax, papers, insurance files, property improvements, letters, receipts. Nothing. Nearly 3 o'clock in the morning, I noticed something unusual. The inside cover of the binder felt thicker than the back cover. I pressed against the leather. Something solid rested beneath it. My heart raced. Carefully, I examined the stitching. One edge had been repaired years earlier, almost invisibly. Using a small pocket knife, I gently lifted the loose thread. A hidden compartment appeared. Inside rested a folded envelope. My father's handwriting covered the front. For my child. Open only if someone ever tries to steal this land. I stared at those words. My hands trembled. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper smelled faintly of old cedar. My father wrote, "If you are reading this, someone finally discovered what I spent my life protecting." I smiled sadly. Even after all these years, he was still speaking to me. The letter continued. The stories about hidden gold are false. The rumors about government money are false. People have searched for decades because they believed legends instead of facts. I turned the page. The truth is much more important. My grandfather worked with county officials after the war. He agreed to hide something until the rightful owners could reclaim it. Those owners never returned. Many records disappeared. Many people died. Only our family remembered. If dishonest people ever learn about it, they will destroy this property searching for it. That is why I preserved every legal document. Land ownership protects what lies beneath. Another folded paper slipped from the letter. It was a hand-drawn map. Not of the entire property. Only of the oak tree. Several measurements extended from the trunk. One mark carried a single word maker. I hurried outside. Moonlight illuminated the yard. The old oak cast enormous shadows across the grass. The officer on duty noticed me. "I found something." He walked over immediately. I showed him the letter. He carefully read every page. Within minutes, he called the county official. Less than an hour later, the yard filled with investigators once again. This time they brought archaeologists, not construction workers, professional excavation specialists. The lead archaeologist studied my father's map. He smiled. "Your father was very precise." They measured from the trunk, north, then east, exactly as the map instructed. One archaeologist gently brushed away leaves. Another inserted a thin soil probe after several careful attempts. The probe struck something hard, not stone, not tree root. Metal. Nobody spoke. Portable floodlights illuminated the entire backyard. The team began removing soil by hand. No heavy machinery. No shovels striking blindly. Only careful brushes, small trowels, pot work. Nearly 2 hours passed. Finally, one archaeologist whispered, "I found it." Everyone leaned forward. A rusted steel corner emerged from the earth. Then another. Slowly, an old metal container appeared beneath the roots. It was much smaller than anyone expected. About the size of a briefcase. Heavy steel clasps sealed the lid. The surface carried faded military markings. The historian stepped closer. Her eyes widened. "I have seen this symbol before." She pointed toward the side. "It belongs to a wartime records division." The older county official looked at me. "Whatever is inside, it has remained untouched for more than 80 years. The archaeologist carefully lifted the container from the ground. No one attempted to force it open. The historian gently brushed away decades of dirt. Then she discovered a brass nameplate. Everyone crowded closer. The engraved words slowly became readable beneath the dust. "Resist urn unopened to the Harrison estate upon identification of surviving heirs." I stared at the name, Harrison. It meant nothing to me until I remembered one sentence from my father's letter. The rightful owners never returned. The county historian looked stunned, then she whispered, "I know exactly who the Harrison family was. And if I am correct, this little box has been missing since the final months of the Second World War." She looked directly at me. "It may solve one of the oldest unsolved historical mysteries in this county." Every flashlight remained fixed on the weathered steel container, because after more than 80 years beneath the roots of our ancient oak tree, the truth hidden beneath my family's land was finally ready to come back into the light-smudged container. No one touched the container. The archaeologists photographed it from every angle. Every scratch, every rusted hinge, every faded military marking. The county historian carefully adjusted her glasses. Her hands trembled slightly. "I have spent 20 years researching local wartime history. I never expected to see this." One archaeologist carefully checked the steel clasps. They are still sealed. The container has never been opened. The police officer recorded every statement. The entire excavation became an official evidence scene. I looked down at the weathered box. It had rested beneath my family's oak tree longer than I had been alive, longer than my father, longer than my grandfather had owned the property. The county historian looked at me. "Do you know who purchased this land before your grandfather?" I shook my head. "My father never mentioned it." She smiled gently. "He probably wanted to protect you." She opened another archive folder. Inside rested faded property records. The Harrison family originally owned this entire valley. They donated farmland during the war. The government established temporary storage locations. After the war ended, officials intended to return everything, but one transport convoy disappeared. The records stopped. The Harrison family believed the government had lost everything. The archaeologist nodded toward the steel container. "Perhaps they never lost it. They simply never came back." The sun slowly rose above the neighborhood. Golden light spread across the backyard. Its rays reflected softly from the rusted metal box. One archaeologist carefully tested the lock. "It is stable. We can open it safely." The historian stopped him. "Not here." Everyone looked at her. "This container belongs to an active historical investigation. It should be opened under controlled documentation." The older county official agreed immediately. Avery's signature, Avery photograph. Every piece of evidence had to be recorded. The container was carefully placed inside a padded transport case. As it disappeared into the county vehicle, I unexpectedly felt relieved. For years, Richard had tried to reach that box. Now it was finally safe. The officials thanked me for preserving the property. One by one, they left. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Almost. Nothing truly felt normal anymore. Reporters arrived later that afternoon. Police vehicles continued visiting Richard's house. Evidence boxes filled the sidewalk. Neighbors gathered in small groups. Everyone talked quietly. Nobody had imagined the quiet man next door had spent years planning land fraud. Emily visited before sunset. She carried another storage box. "I found these inside Richard's office." She handed them to me. Inside were notebooks, dozens of them. Every page contained handwritten observations, dates, weather conditions, my work schedule, vacation plans, delivery times, family gatherings. Richard had watched my house for nearly 6 years. A knot formed in my stomach. One page stood out. Across the top he had written, "The owner never leaves the property records unattended." Beneath it, another sentence, "Need alternative strategy." He had known about my father's careful record keeping. He simply believed he could overwhelm me before I found the documents. Emily pulled another envelope from the box. I almost forgot. This was hidden inside his desk. The envelope contained old newspaper clippings. Every article featured my father. Some described volunteer historical preservation projects. Others discussed community planning meetings. One article caught my attention. My father stood beside the same oak tree. The headline read, "Local resident helps preserve historic landmark." I had never seen the article before. On the back, someone had written a note. "Watch him, he knows where it is." The handwriting matched Richard's notebooks. Emily looked disturbed. "He obsessed over your father." I slowly nodded. He underestimated him. Days turned into weeks. Richard remained in custody while investigators expanded their case. More homeowners came forward. Surveyors restored original property boundaries throughout the neighborhood. Several families recovered land they never realized had been stolen. Mrs. Lawson gained almost 4 feet of backyard. Another family recovered part of their driveway. A retired veteran regained enough land to rebuild a damaged fence. One dishonest man had quietly altered an entire neighborhood. Every correction felt like justice. Then one morning, I received a phone call from the county historian. Her voice sounded excited. We opened the container. My heartbeat quickened. What was inside? "You should come." Less than an hour later, I arrived at the county archives. The historian welcomed me into a climate-controlled examination room. The steel container rested on a large table. Its lid stood open. Inside were carefully wrapped packages. No gold, no jewels, no stacks of cash. Instead, leather document cases, wax-sealed envelopes, bound journals, rolled maps. Everything had been perfectly preserved. The historian smiled. Richard searched for treasure. He never imagined these. She carefully lifted one journal. The papers belonged to the Harrison family. Another package contained military correspondence. Another held engineering drawings. Another contained land ownership agreements signed before the war. The historian gently opened the largest leather portfolio. Inside rested hundreds of original photographs. Entire communities, historic buildings, families, soldiers preparing to leave for Europe, factories producing equipment, children playing beside streets that no longer existed. Many photographs documented local history that experts believed had been permanently lost. Some captured important government meetings, others preserved handwritten records that filled gaps in county archives. The historian looked almost emotional. This collection changes everything. It restores decades of missing history. Researchers entered the room one after another. Each reacted with amazement. One specialist discovered original architectural drawings for the old courthouse. Another located wartime supply records. Another identified handwritten letters from community leaders whose papers had disappeared generations earlier. The little steel box contained no fortune. It contained memory, history, identity. Things that could never be replaced. The historian turned toward me. Your family protected this collection for more than 80 years, without realizing it. I removed my father's letter from my pocket. She read it quietly. When she finished, she smiled. He knew exactly what he was protecting. He simply honored a promise. Several months later, the county organized a public ceremony. The recovered collection became the centerpiece of a new historical exhibit. My father received a posthumous recognition award for preserving an irreplaceable part of local history. My grandfather's name appeared beside his. So did the names of the Harrison family. Their surviving descendants traveled from another state to attend the ceremony. An elderly woman approached me afterward. Tears filled her eyes. My grandfather always believed our family records still existed. He died hoping someone honest would someday find them. She gently held my hands. Your family kept that promise. There was nothing I could say, only gratitude. Back home, the oak tree still stood proudly over the backyard, exactly where it had always stood. Children played beneath its branches. Neighbors stopped to admire it. A small historical marker was placed nearby. It explained the tree's role in preserving an important chapter of local history. One evening, I sat beneath its shade with Mrs. Lawson. She smiled toward the sunset. Richard wanted land. I nodded. He believed property created wealth. She laughed softly. In the end, The land gave something much more valuable. She was right. Richard lost his freedom because he chased something he never understood. He believed ownership came from forged papers. My father believed ownership came with responsibility. That difference changed everything. I often think about the morning I heard bulldozers outside my window. At the time, I believed I was fighting to save a backyard. Instead, I was protecting decades of truth. The legal documents my father carefully preserved did more than save my property. They exposed years of fraud, restored stolen land to innocent families, recovered forgotten history, and fulfilled a promise that had survived more than 80 years. Every time the wind moves through the branches of that old oak tree, I remember the lesson my father left behind. The strongest foundation any home can have is not concrete. It is honesty, because land can be measured. Broadpori lines can be mapped. Dokshigants can be filed. But integrity is the one thing that no dishonest neighbor can ever steal. Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. The sound of bulldozers was replaced by birds singing beneath the old oak tree. Fresh flowers bloomed where construction stakes had once stood. My garden recovered. The scars across the lawn disappeared. The memories never did. The county completed its investigation. Richard pleaded guilty to multiple fraud-related charges. Several victims recovered their property. Others received financial compensation for years of damage. Every forged survey, every fake boundary marker, every dishonest document became evidence against him. Justice arrived through patience, not revenge. The Harrison family collection was carefully restored. Historians spent months preserving every letter, every photograph, every journal. The exhibit eventually opened to the public. Visitors came from across the state. Many stood quietly in front of the displays, writing stories that almost vanished forever. A small plaque honored everyone who protected the collection through the decades. My grandfather's name appeared first. My father's name followed beneath it. Seeing those names together filled me with pride. Neither of them became famous. Neither expected recognition. They simply kept a promise. That was enough. The county also restored every original property marker throughout our neighborhood. Professional surveyors verified each boundary. New records were filed. Future disputes became almost impossible. Neighbors who once barely spoke now looked out for one another. We had learned that trust was worth protecting. Mrs. Lawson often visited for afternoon tea beneath the oak tree. She always smiled at its enormous branches. "Your father knew this tree would outlive all of us." I smiled back. He wanted honesty to outlive us too. Every autumn the leaves covered my yard in gold. I no longer saw extra work. I saw a reminder. Some things become more valuable with time. One quiet evening, I opened my father's binder once more. The documents remained perfectly organized. Every receipt, every survey, every letter, exactly where he left them. I added one final page. It described everything that had happened: the attempted land theft, the investigation, the recovered history, the justice that followed. At the bottom, I signed my name. Then I placed the binder back inside the fireproof cabinet. Hopefully no one would ever need it again. Years later, children from local schools visited the historical exhibit. Teachers told them about honesty, responsibility, and the importance of preserving history. Many of them asked about the old oak tree. Some even visited the neighborhood with their families. They stood quietly behind the small historical marker, looking up at the same branches that had guarded a forgotten promise for generations. Whenever someone asked me how I managed to stop my neighbor from stealing my land, they usually expected a dramatic answer. They expected me to say luck, or courage, or perfect timing. The truth was much simpler. My father believed that every important paper deserved a safe place. He believed that honesty should always be documented. He believed that protecting what was right was never wasted effort. Because of those beliefs, a dishonest man failed. Innocent, innocent families recovered what belonged to them. A forgotten piece of history returned to the world, and one old oak tree remained exactly where it had always stood, strong, steady, unmoved. Whenever the wind rustles through its branches, I still hear my father's voice. Take care of what is yours, not because it is valuable, but because one day it may protect something far greater than you ever imagined. That lesson became the greatest inheritance he ever left me, not the land, not the house, not the documents, but the understanding that integrity is the only legacy that grows stronger with every generation. And that is why my neighbor lost everything, because he tried to steal land, while my family had spent generations protecting the truth.